Great to see you again, Lee. I'm so happy.
Great to see you again, Darren.
I'm really excited. There's so much to cover. We'll be sort of continuing along the lines that we established in our previous conversation.
Yeah.
And let's see here. So part of where we left off, we were talking a little bit about how it's possible, a process that resembles the caterpillar going into a chrysalis, right?
Yeah.
Where you can sort of liquefy the structure of history in the self and then reforge it, maybe without some of the impediments
Right.
that it
Yes.
was perhaps carrying historically and struggling with. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
can return to therapy. I just want to sort of bookmark that idea.
Hmm.
But there's a span in your story previously that I'd like to revisit, which is
Hmm.
the span between your walk and when you begin to enter the learning process that I think starts with NLP, goes to hypnosis, goes to mesmerism, and then circles back maybe to the walk and the events during it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So maybe if you can help prompt me, because I'll be coming out with a lot of things here, which will be quite freeform. But so we spoke about in the previous interview or conversation, I prefer to put it, really, that we did. Um, There was the coast to coast walk that I mentioned, and the particular section called the Lyke Wake Walk, which was particularly important. That's where I had my what I'll call my Milky Way experience,
Mm.
where I had the experience of connecting the heavens and the earth through my physical body. It was a very visceral experience. Um, and after this walk, as I mentioned, returning back to London where I was living at the time. So, like I say, this was around 1990. Um, I ended up I was catapulted into a kind of what they would call in the alchemical tradition, kind of like a nigredo state. So I felt a little bit like everything was disintegrating, like I'd been ripped open, and my psychic skin was really raw and bare. I was able to sense everything around me, the vibrations of all of the people around me, um,
Mm.
but in an uncomfortable way when I returned from doing that walk, which was a very joyous experience. It was, an incredibly joyous experience doing that walk. Like I say, returning to the city, returning to London at that time, very, very difficult. Now, the important thing is that during that time, like I say, it was almost like entering into a type of depressive state.
Mm.
But it also felt like I had terrible flu, so it was almost like a physical state as well. Um, but as I was coming out of this, I started to come out of this due to a series of dreams that I started to have. And this is where dreams become really important in this whole scenario we're speaking about. So I started to have lots of dreams, and in these dreams, I think I touched on this in the previous part, but I didn't go into great detail. In these dreams, there was a specific hill that was in these dreams, and it was very, very characteristic. So it was the kind of thing that stuck in my head, and it was a recurring dream as well. And from the top of the hill, um, I looked down the hill, and there was some cornfields, and there was a river flowing through the cornfields. And I even could see, because of the dreams, because of my encounters with a particular figure in these dreams, that I found, there was a boat, and it was on a river, and this river was within the cornfield that I could see down in the sloping valley in the vale, seen from this particular hill. And inside this boat was a goddess-like figure, a feminine figure. And every time I got into the boat with her, we would go for a ride. And every night we would go a little further. And this ride down the river was going from the vision of the hill, from the view of the hill looking down. The river flowed left, to the left. So I got into the boat with her, and every time I woke up, I felt an immense surge of healing energy. So this dream I noticed was beginning to act as a kind of medicine. It was healing me every single night, every night that I had the dream. I was looking forwards to actually being back there again. And sure enough, every now and again, it kept coming back. And this dream would just heal me a little bit more. And this is what got me out of whatever it was I was in at the time.
Do you have any impression about how did you think about the woman, the boat, and the river? But particularly the woman, about her identity. Was it a matter of concern to you?
Weirdly, no. I just knew that she represented some kind of divine feminine force, that she was somehow a personification of nature that I was meeting in this boat. And that's all that really concerned me.
Can you describe her, or from your recollection? I mean, maybe she doesn't have a specific appearance, but what do you recall?
Well, I do recall that she had long hair. I do recall that she had a long dress. I think it was white, if I remember. I don't have full recollection of that. But
the dreaming mind is
the wooden rowing boat. I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, the dreaming mind isn't as concerned with what we might think of as particulars.
Okay.
It doesn't need them.
But it was a cornfield. That I find significant. The fact that it was a cornfield.
Yes. And this takes place looking down from Knapp Hill, right?
That's right. That's right. But I didn't know it was called Knapp Hill.
I see.
Now, I've mentioned this to you obviously in private, but the thing is I had no idea who this person was. I had no idea where this place was. It was a dream. But you see, in 1994, in the summer, I think it was the summer of 1994, there was a couple of friends of mine. I used to work on markets in London. I used to sell old 50s rock and roll collectible records and 60s psychedelic stuff and things like that.
Copy.
And a couple of my friends there, I got chatting with them on the stall, and they just said to me, let's they knew I had a van, so and we had similar interests, we discovered. And they said, should we take a trip out to the West Country? Would you take us? And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. So we got in the van and went looking for crop circles. So this is in the summer of 1994.
And whereabouts are you when you're on this journey?
Yeah, you mean in terms of
geography? Where are you going?
Geography, right? Okay, so we got in the car, in the van, and we drove out of London and went over to the area of Avebury, which is a really amazing place for those who've never been there. Look it up. It's in Wiltshire, which is in the West Country, and we were looking around for all of these crop circles, and we found one or two that day around around Avebury, around sort of in that vicinity, in the fields
So you
around
just
there.
drive out of London to Avebury and you
Yeah.
find crop circles just out there without even knowing where you're going. There's no internet, right? You're not like
No, there was no internet. No
so
internet.
you're just
No, no.
adventuring out in your van and you
Yep.
come across crop circles. I mean, I find
Yeah.
that kind of surprising, but I'm listening. Please continue.
Well, as the story actually goes, is the fact that we actually in t basically all three of us agreed that all of the crop circles we found that day, I think it was two or three we saw, were kind of just fake.
Okay.
And it was kind of crop circle season.
Right. Okay, I follow.
Yeah, so there were supposedly some around, or so they'd heard, which is what spurred them on to want to go and do the trip.
Hmm.
So we went out there, and all day we were looking for these things. We found two or three, like I say, and but we weren't convinced. They seemed a bit scrappy and a bit kind of, like maybe some teenagers had knocked it up overnight, sort of thing. And uh, so we sort of everyone was a bit disappointed. We'd had a great trip out, but everyone was really tired, and it was the end of the day. We'd been traipsing around all day through these fields and cornfields and stuff. And I just got this thought as a driver, thought, oh, how about taking a different route? Let's go just take a random route off and go up through another route, another way.
Hmm.
Instead of going the main roads home, let's go off some other way. So we did this, and I didn't really know the area apart from maybe a couple of the main routes around there. Um, and all of a sudden, like as we were going through all of these open plains, I suddenly saw the way the road swooped up to the right. There was a track, a path coming away from the road. And as soon as I saw this, I had this immense impetus, this impulse, just stop the car and get out and walk up that track.
Hmm.
So I did. And of course, they were really, really tired, and they were complaining. It's like, oh, we've not found anything. You've been walking all day. We're really, really tired. And we were supposed to be on the way home. So I said, you can wait here. And so they did. They waited in the van, and I traipsed on up the track. So
Hmm.
I got out the van, traipsed up the track, and went to the top of this track, the top of a hill. So when I got to the top, I stood there and looked down across the hill. Lo and behold, I was absolutely transfixed by the fact that what I had in front of me was exactly what I'd seen in my dreams at least 5 years earlier. So back in, like I say, coming from the coast to coast back in 1990. So about 4 or 5 years earlier, I'd seen this very, very place in my dreams. You can't ignore that when that happens. You're there looking at the scene, and lo and behold, there is the valley, there is the river, snaking through exactly the same place.
Hmm.
And while this is in my mind right now, I must mention this just in case it's not completed. It's only about a month ago, I think just before our interview, the last interview we had, that I met a lady through a mutual friend around here where I live. And she actually revealed what I understand to be the actual name of this particular goddess that I'd come across.
Okay, this is the thing I was having earlier. Capacity, right? I sensed like she is someone. Who is she? I'm listening. Yeah, please.
Right. Now, I feel it's maybe not the right circumstance to reveal that name.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah,
And such things, there are some things that it is important to keep private
yeah,
and also
yeah.
to not speak about.
That's right.
And
And
I
you can
honor,
feel that viscerally. You can
yes,
feel, don't speak of it.
yes, yes, good. Yes, I honor this and understand.
Yeah,
But please
yeah.
continue, I'm with you.
In actual fact, all I've mentioned up till this point, including the fact that there was this feminine figure, it was a goddess figure, it was there in the boat, it was revealed in a dream. These parts, until very recently, I've had a do not speak about it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what
It's
changed?
only now I'm beginning to speak about it.
Wow, so do you have any sense of what changed that made you feel more comfortable to speak of it?
That's an interesting question. In my physical body, my body is telling me it's okay to mention it.
Hmm.
It's a visceral sensation. There's a stop feeling when you know that something is
Yes.
not the time to speak about it.
Yes,
And
it's funny that you say that because there we have this colloquialism in English, what we call the still small voice, right?
right, right.
And also, I think, though I'm not an expert on this topic, Socrates' daimon,
Yeah,
what it primarily did was just say no.
yeah, yeah.
Didn't tell him what to do. They didn't have conversations, at least not in the records that we have. The
Mm,
one thing that we know about it is it tells him just don't do this. Or it might say, you made a mistake, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so there's this interesting, in my own experience with this, a couple times in my life, I heard it tell me, whatever it is, right? Don't. Just
yeah,
this one, like, no.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and not and there I've had other experiences of sort of a daimonic intelligence or whatever, but I honor that. And I want to just mention that I have a close friend who works with neurodivergent people,
yeah.
and one of her primary areas of expertise is a process called positive disintegration.
Okay.
And when you were talking about what took place when you returned to London, it has the earmarks of this process.
Right, right.
And she talks about it as in a variety of senses, but it's quite fascinating, because she says that it's a somatic array. It's an array of somatic intelligences. And you talk about feeling that you had the flu, but you also talk about having these extra sensitivities where you could feel people's energy and things like this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But it sort of has the earmarks of this process. I recognize from my recent discussion with her, uh, a similarity there. Okay, so you met a woman somewhat recently. She
hmm.
revealed to you, and I presume that when she revealed this, it was resonant. You were like, or how did you feel?
Yeah, actually, I was absolutely gobsmacked because the very moment that and the odd thing is the fact that I was describing this specific place also caused a huge reaction and huge explosion for her also, because she said, I can't believe the synchronicity of what you're describing to me. She said it was literally just last night for the very first time that I was earmarking that very place you're telling me about to actually go and visit it.
Mhm.
Um, and then she revealed to me the actual name of the of this particular goddess figure. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like a mutual explosive amazing sort of crossflow of information. And yes, I definitely feel it's not the right time to talk about the name. I'm not saying
Yeah,
that
well, let's
just
honor
for the
that.
sake of theory, to
Yeah,
be
yeah. No,
mysterious.
this is trivial. What we're
Yeah,
doing here is, I mean, it's beautiful and
yeah,
profound for me, and
yeah,
but this is a not the place for this kind of. I just honor the fact
yeah.
of there's some things we shouldn't speak openly and particularly publicly or even on recordings about.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I just have a couple questions about this. How did you come across this person? How long have you known them? Tell me
I
something
didn't
about
know.
how you met.
That's the peculiar thing. I'd never, well, actually, funnily enough, um I'd seen this person a couple of times, and there'd been an acknowledgement, like I was recognized and so on, but there'd been no interaction, and there's been no interaction since either.
Hmm,
It was purely just on this day. I was there to meet someone else entirely, and it happened to be one of these talks over a coffee table that ended up sort of spilling out.
hmm,
And oddly, it somehow, probably because of the company I was in, the conversation turned in that direction. And
wow.
and just strangely, these hugely important missing fragments of information that I'd been hanging on, waiting for these extra pieces to arrive for years. And this very much touches on something central to my own personal attitude towards receiving gnosis, or how it happens with dreams, with actual encounters. um Whenever you receive anything what seems to be significant at the time, I take quite a detached approach to it. I don't let myself get over attached or overexcited by anything which seems significant.
Hmm,
What I tend to do is I tend to sort of earmark the events, or earmark these things, and put them on the shelf, so to speak, to let them hang around, because I have absolute faith or certainty in one way or another that these things will be answered, or I will understand their true significance, even if I have to wait years for it to happen. And this was a really good example of what I'm saying, because I take life as one whole, if you like. So there are things that we might be experiencing now in our esoteric internal experiences, in our dreams, in our personal revelations of any kind, or synchronicities, significant synchronicity, which I have no doubt we will find the answers to 20 years from now.
hmm.
I have full faith of that. There's no rush about this.
So it's really interesting to hear you say this because uh, I trust the wisdom of the intelligences in you that have this sense of no need to get super excited about this. Put this on the shelf. Let it sort of I don't know what the word is, right? Be enriched by time or sort of like aged. Let it age,
Yeah.
right? And then in time it will become clear. The thing that I find funny about that is I'm completely the opposite, and it gets me in trouble. I get
Uh-huh.
super excited, right? And so I can become so excited and enchanted that I get very spun up, and then and various things. It doesn't always lead to disaster, but sometimes it does, right?
Right.
Because I'm disoriented by by the excitement and the enchantment. And when one is disoriented, you know,
Yeah.
um, untoward events may occur. Okay, so there's a number of threads here, and I have them fairly well organized in my mind. Um, you mentioned in private conversation earlier
Yeah.
the Lyke Wake Walk. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the definitions of those two terms and what they came to mean for you?
Right. Okay. So, like I said, back in 1990, I undertook the Lyke Wake Walk, which was part of the Coast to Coast Walk. So I'll just recap very, very quickly from what I explained a little bit of in the previous
Yes.
part that we did.
Hmm.
England's a bit like a hand. The Coast to Coast Walk, of course, goes directly from the east, from the east to the west coast. Uh,
Name the starting and ending places if you don't mind.
yeah. So on the on the west coast, on the west coast, which would be if this was the hand of England, this is Scotland up here, this is Northumbria, and here is the Pennine Ridge running down the middle. The Lake District over on the west is sort of where we started. So it's kind of like from the west coast over to the east coast. Of course, this would be Cornwall, London somewhere over here. Cornwall's a bit like where the thumb is.
Mm.
So you would travel across
Starting
from
there.
well, in this instance, I started from the west coast going to the east.
Yes, but what is the place where you started the name? If you
So
don't,
so it's Saint Bees Head.
great, thank you.
Saint Bees Head. So going from Saint Bees Head and then going across the Lake District, crossing the Pennine Ridge, which was very peculiar. I've just remembered. I may as well say these things as they're coming into my mind. Crossing the Pennine Ridge, I ended up meeting an old couple on the top of the Pennine watershed, really boggy watershed in mist. A really old couple who were happening to walk this particular stretch of the Pennine Ridge. And so I kind of started chatting to them in the middle of mist, in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, this is interesting. I said to the lady, old lady, I said to the older lady, I said, your accent sounds quite familiar. Like it sounds like it's from where I grew up, which is a place called Ackworth, which I grew up in as a small child,
Hmm.
which is an old oak grove. Originally, it was part of an old druidic oak grove up on a moor top. And she said, "Oh yeah, I come from a place near to Leeds, because don't forget this is at the Pennine Ridge here. It's sort of on the way to. It's almost closer to Manchester, really,
Hmm.
at this particular point. So she could have been from anywhere up north, but I said no. I identified her accent. She said, no, I'm from closer to Pontefract, Wakefield, outside of Leeds. I said, oh, so am I. So am I. She said, well, do you know a place called Ackworth? I said, well, yes, it's the village I grew up in. And she goes, oh, really? She said, well, I lived on Moortop in Ackworth. I said, well, that's interesting because I lived on Moortop in Ackworth as well. And it turned out, she said, oh, well, you know that big house near to the roundabout? It's now called the Elm Tree Restaurant. Well, that was my house when I was a child. I said, well, my house is literally joined onto your house. It's the coach house that belonged to your house. She goes, oh, the coach house. I said, yes. So she was literally my next door neighbor. Her house was literally physically joined onto the house I grew up in on one
Surely
side.
it, surely it has occurred to you that this might not be an ordinary couple.
It has, while I was actually speaking to you now, it kind of started to dawn upon me. I was beginning to think, I was describing the mist and everything, and I'm thinking to myself, hmm,
Yeah, because what she's saying in a way is in code, right? In a way that wouldn't necessarily reveal it. She's saying, you and I have been associated our entire lives,
mm-hmm,
right? Which is the
mm-hmm.
kind of thing that, for example, the moon might say.
Yes,
You were to
yes,
meet the moon.
yes,
And it's very common in, now I'm not making any claims about what took place with you, right?
sure.
I'm just noticing that it's common in indigenous stories for a very elderly couple to appear,
Oh,
right? And
I didn't know this.
yes, yes, very, very elderly couple appears, and they may appear frail or weak, and they often look quite old. And it's very strange to find an elderly couple out in the middle of wherever you were,
Pennine
in the
watershed.
like wandering around in the mist. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
what are they doing? Like I know what you're doing, and you're a young
yeah,
guy, and
yeah.
you're on a quest.
Yeah, yeah.
And since you're on a quest and you encounter an elderly couple, but in many cases, it's not clear to the people at the time that the elderly couple represent the sun and the moon, but they often do, right? And it's quite often that the sun may give a gift or the moon may give knowledge. But yeah, it's I just can't help but notice the strange beat, like it's not metaphor, there's another word for it that I don't know what it is, but
Analogy.
the
Analogy?
shape likeness
Uh-huh.
in what she's saying. Oh, you go through a series of steps, right? Oh, you sound like, oh yes, you know, do you know this, you know, and then it just traverses to, we've been there the whole time, like we've been together the whole time in a strange way, right? Our origins are linked up, right? So that's very profound, and I'm grateful to hear that story. I'm glad you came across it. Please continue.
Yeah, a couple of other things have just dawned on me because you've pointed this out. And that's the wonderful thing about doing these sessions with you is that, all of these new parts of insight suddenly spring up while I'm in the middle of speaking to you. So the Pennine Ridge is quite literally, I mean, it's known as the backbone of England, but
Ah,
what's significant about this from the west to the east is that it's the threshold between them. So this watershed was quite literally the barrier, the physical barrier that divides Yorkshire from Lancashire. So
mm,
you've heard of the War of the Roses, the red rose and the white rose. Well, they're
mm.
quite literally divided by these two sides. And what suddenly came upon me is the fact that the old man was from Lancashire and she was from Yorkshire, which was where I was from. So, so you literally had a Yorkshireman and a Yorkshire woman and a Lancashire man on this particular threshold between the two halves of the walk.
Yeah, this curiouser and curiouser.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
hmm, beautiful.
Interesting. Interesting. It's wonderful to have these conversations just to document this stuff as well, because
Yes, yes. This is the thing, you know, when we it's often helpful to have a companion to lead
Mm,
us along
yeah.
uh and help with the sort of the sequencing, right? But
Uh,
when you begin to recover, I'll just mention this very briefly. So
yeah.
my roommate recently came to me and said, you know, totally up to you if you want to do this, but let's talk, if you want, let's record like a life history thing. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, so we started doing this, not for public sharing or anything, for like my own use. And you know, all these things started lighting up because you're resurrecting these moments and
Absolutely.
they start to link together and the whole map starts to light up and that brings to mind perspectives you hadn't, you know, perhaps you haven't seen before. So let's not get too sidetracked by that. Please continue. So you come
Well,
across the couple. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I came across the couple, and it was on this particular threshold area. I mentioned it was a watershed as well. So basically, all of the rivers flow flow down from this place
Mm,
over the Pennine Ridge itself.
mm,
So it's a source of rivers and lakes.
uh-huh.
Um, so where was I going with this? So after this point, of course, you cross over, and then you're going into East Yorkshire, into the east part of the country, and into Yorkshire. And then it's from there that you pick up after a very small area. I think it's called Appleby, Westmoreland. Remember, we walked through a place called Appleby in Westmoreland, um, and you go through there. That was a very beautiful area. It's almost like a very Edenic, very Edenic kind of feel, very lush and green and full of apple blossoms and apple trees. Um, and that was an interesting place as well, because that had some resonance later, but I won't talk about that now.
Mm,
Um, And then you join on to the beginning of the Lyke Wake Walk. So I think you mentioned a little earlier, tell everyone about the Lyke Wake Walk
Yeah, and the
itself.
meanings of the words and how you,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the Lyke Wake Walk, um, Lyke, Lyke. So the Lyke is the corpse itself, but another interpretation is the double, that which is alike to you, that which
Mm.
is like you. But if you're departed, and if you're departed, so like in the Egyptian cosmology, if to call it that, you have the kat or the mummy, the mumia, the body, the corpse, the like. And then above that, you have the car. And the car is like the ghost body. So the more closer to the ghost body, if you like. So it's the habitual body. Um, in Kabbalistic terminology, they would call it like the nefesh, the animal soul, that which hangs around the body or hangs around the corpse. So if you were, say, for example, the like, from the point of view of the nefesh or from the point of view of the car, you would be separated from your physical body, but close to it.
Mm.
So the like is your double, your doppelganger in some sense. And the wake is like in Irish, in Irish ceremonies, when you have somebody who's passed over, they hold a wake. So the wake is the celebration of the person's life, and you usually have a good old knees up, around the grave of the person.
Mm.
It's quite often with the person physically present there in the room. So that's the traditional Irish style of having a wake,
Mm.
celebration of the person's life. Now, this is the Lyke Wake Walk. It covers 40 miles. And this 40-mile expanse, which 40 miles in itself is obviously heavily symbolic as well, because it's the number 40 is always linked with passages of moving from one state to another.
Mm.
You have like 40 days and 40 nights in the biblical symbolism.
Oh, I
You have
see, yes. Mhm.
you have quite often in quite a lot of Tibetan Buddhist internal work, they have like 40-day passages through darkness,
Mhm.
or should we say a 40 day and 40 night passage through darkness, just total darkness in some of their works.
With 5 days on either side, right, as
Yes.
like the lead in, then you have one moon and then the string
Yeah.
out,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So you get
yes,
similar, it's like it's
yes.
a, it could be understood as a lifespan even. I'm with you, please continue.
Yeah, yeah. I think indeed. And so it was on this particular part of the walk, the Lyke Wake Walk, over this 40-mile expanse, which that's where where I had my Milky Way experience,
Hmm.
which was incredibly profound, incredibly significant for everything that followed.
Say a little bit about the experience again, even though I'm sure you have previously.
I did, but I can go a little more into granular detail this time.
Excellent.
So it was the time of year. Let's see. It was the beginning of August, end of August, beginning of September. And this point in time was deliberately chosen because it wouldn't be too searingly hot. So it was the end of summer coming into autumn. Um, so the weather was kind of quite temperate, but I do remember the entire walk up to this point had actually been quite bloody hot actually, all through the Lake District and so on. Apart from maybe some misty and rainy days halfway through on the Pennine Ridge. So going onto the Lyke Wake Walk, these incredibly blue, sonic blue sky.
Hmm.
But the Lyke Wake Walk itself passes through this 40-mile expanse known as Whinny Moor. Now, Whinny Moor is actually in Old English means the wine red moor. Whinny, wine red. So the wine red Whinny Moor. So you're passing through the Whinny Moor. So it's a form of abyss. It's a type of abyssal symbolism. And what it actually, I've later come to understand, what I've actually come to understand it means is that you're actually passing through the menstruation period of the goddess.
Beautiful.
Because the track takes you through the track of death.
Mhm.
So it's very Scorpio laden. It's very, very scorpionic, Scorpio symbolism, but it's all wine red. It's like a menstruation period. Now, this is interesting, and it just dawned on me right now as I'm speaking that perhaps this is why and where the goddess symbolism came from that led me out of the dream, which is really amazing how that's just dawned on me.
Mhm.
So truly, you know, I mean, some quite revelatory thoughts come to me even while I'm speaking here now.
That's so beautiful. This is what I'm hoping for, yes.
Yeah, and the actual track is laden with marker points, marker posts, and those marker posts are actually carved. I have a book with me. I'll show you some pictures. I'll try and find some pictures.
Yes.
The marker posts themselves are ancient pagan standing stones which mark the track. Some of them have been turned into crosses, were carved into Celtic crosses.
Mm.
Here we go. But quite a few of them are still pagan standing stones. This is, I don't know if you can see
Yes. Mm. Oh,
with
wow.
this face here,
Mhm.
and some of them are just menhirs, typical menhirs.
Mhm.
So over the 40-mile expanse, the way you find your way is by spotting these stones on the hill ridges
Mm.
as you're walking along the track. And all of the heather, the reason why it's the wine red moor is because all of the heather goes sonic purple red.
Mm.
So with the blue sky and the sonic purple red, the weather had been very much like this, clear blue, sonic purple red, and these standing stones marking the way along the way. And some of them are actually goddess stones as well. One of them is called Fat Betty.
Mm.
Um, so there we have it. That's actually the destination of where it goes, Ravenscar.
Right.
So that's the where you actually stop, Ravenscar.
Huh.
And the actual emblem for the Lyke Wake Walk
Often with a candle
is a
in
coffin
it.
with a candle inside.
Uh-huh.
Interestingly, I decided to light a candle before I actually started this interview.
Beautiful. Mm.
So there you go, a little bit more information there for you. But it came across to me very much that the wine red moor is actually the menstruation of the goddess. Yes.
That's crucially beautiful. We can return to this topic, but I want to keep on the thread that we're on, and I'm
Yes.
trying to carefully track that. So describe a little bit more about the experience. So I'm just going to say something briefly.
Sure.
There was a phase before my own experience where I used to practice a sort of a a qigong practice, actually,
Hmm.
where basically my teacher had taught us to gather up the energy from the earth, bring it up into the body, um, distribute it up into the sky, right,
Yeah.
into the universe, and then draw the universal energy back down into our body and down into the earth, right?
Yeah.
So you basically just lean over, you pick up the energy bent over, you draw it up into your bodies with an in breath. You send it up with an out breath, you draw it back with an in-breath, you send it down with an out-breath.
Yeah.
And I added to that practice that I was drawing the love of the planet all together, all the animals, all the living places, all the histories, that love into the energy, and then sort of like many branches of a tree, sending that love out into the universe, literally saying like, we love you, we remember you, we adore you. And then the same thing back, right? We love you, we remember you, we adore you, back into the earth. And I used to do this all the time without having any complex intellection
Mm,
about it, right?
mm.
And when you talked about your experience with the Milky Way, I was reminded of this practice.
Right.
So please share whatever comes to mind about the experience.
Yeah. So it had been really hot. I remember during that day. um, and there was I put up the tent in the middle of this moor, and I chose to put the tent uh, in a field at the side of an inn. So it was like a pub, an inn, in the
Mhm.
middle of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. And I went into the pub, and in those days, I hardly used to drink at all. I used to have like lime and soda, something like that. Like I wasn't even drinking. I went into the pub and had a couple of these lime and sodas or whatever, and came back out to the tent. And I was shocked to find that after the sun had gone down, that there was a light frost on the ground
Mm,
because the moors out there were very exposed.
mhm.
And there was a couple of other things I learned at that time as well, which taught me some really interesting things to do with the action of the sun upon the earth and interacting with the earth and the waters, which actually led me to some really, really quite amazing understandings of the entire process of nature.
Mm.
I was going to use the word. It taught me quite a lot of the secrets of alchemy, but
Wow.
that sounds really grandiose. But
I
it
don't think
truly
we have to be too afraid of that.
it truly did,
Oh.
and I'll explain a little more of that later. But that day, the frost was on the ground, or that evening, the frost was on the ground. The temperature had dropped quite a lot, and because it was so cold, and because the sky was so clear, and because there was no light pollution whatsoever, I looked at the frost, crunch, 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 feet on the floor, crunch, crunch, crunch. So my attention was diverted down by the crunching, and then I lifted my head up. I wanted to just instinctively wanted to know what was right above me. So crunching feet, lifted up the head. The trajectory of my vision literally caught from the very moment my head was lifted, the whole path of the Milky Way just shot up in front of me and above me, all the way behind me, and it felt like the entire thing from right above me, right through my feet, just like the two things just collided and like a huge bang. And this intense visceral feeling of absolute connectivity, like an explosion coming from within the core of me, reaching out forever. Um, Everything met in that moment. So there was something really, really special about that moment.
Mm.
It was like yoga in the true sense of the word, true union.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it
Just, I
really
just find it
was.
very touching for some reason to hear this story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Please continue.
It ever since that time, I've not been able to comprehend anything as separate.
What a gift. What a healing inversion.
Yeah, it also comes with a great price, though, it seems. Because the although that's a huge understanding in and of itself, and like you say, could be seen to be a gift. I think the Buddhists would have called it, you know, it leads to the vision of universal sorrow,
Oh.
in the sense that although you understand the pure joy that's behind everything, you can see and sense, and this is what led me to that sorrow when I came back to the city.
Mm.
There was this understanding that everyone is so disconnected from that reality that such great pain and suffering results because of the lack of understanding of the connectivity. And
Hmm.
I understood that all healing is rooted in bringing people back to that sense of connectivity.
Yes, and thus, in some sense, perhaps you will understand. I'd be surprised if you didn't, what I mean when I say.
I'll try. I'll have a go.
I doubt you'll have any trouble. Many of my closest friends, these are people who I would call bridge souls, right?
Right.
They join two ordinarily disparate.
Hmm.
It's funny, I'm looking at my reflection, it's backwards, so I'm using the wrong ad. But yeah, they join two ordinarily disparate uh, peoples, places, histories, futures. So, for example, one of my friends, Ryan Firstdiver, he's a Blackfoot beaver man, and
Right.
he's so in the Blackfoot traditional in their traditional life, the beaver man is the central ceremonial. All the other societies orbit the beaver bundle tradition, and
Right.
so he's half he's half Caucasian too. So he joins like the colonizers and the Blackfoot people. He also takes care of rattlesnakes there, so they are protected there. So he joins the snake people to the regular people. He's like this bridge between five or six different things. I just use him as an example because he's a great
Hmm.
example of this.
Hmm.
But many of my close friends are like this. They're the between, right?
Right.
And even when you're telling the story, you're saying like the sky came down and the earth and
Yep.
they joined, right?
Yep.
So but say more about, was it painful for you?
In what time, what respect?
Right. You say that you weren't able to see things as separate, and I say,
Yes.
ah, that's a
Yes.
gift, and you say yes, but there's a price.
Yes. It seems there
Where
is a price.
did the
Yes.
price have bite in you?
Yeah, it can do. It can do because sometimes if sometimes you can't it's quite difficult to sometimes see the disconnection, the lack of connectivity, I think is the way to put it. With certain individuals, it's quite painful to see the lack of connectivity that they actually have. And there's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is do things in an incredibly subtle way to help coax people towards this experience or this understanding.
So that brings up a topic that that I think is relevant here,
Yeah.
particularly in as it relates to human communication in general, but also
Yes.
um, the the common difference between men and women,
Yeah.
and hypnosis, NLP, perhaps mesmerism, but certainly the idea of suggestion, which is something, this is a topic we didn't properly explore previously. One of my bookmarks. So, I've noticed I've always tended to emulate girls. When I was in elementary school, they were the high performers. They could do 7 things, the boys could do 2. I emulated the girls, right? Um, and I learned very quickly that that was a much faster path to progress in
Mhm.
general.
Mhm.
Uh, and the women are masters of indirection, generally speaking, right? They can suggest very subtly something. They're very cautious about making direct statements because they can then be held to task for it later. And they've been historically subjected to masculine inquisition every like a billion times per lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Every woman, right? Masculine inquisition, um, you know. So where am I going with this? I myself have realized, and we spoke briefly of this in the last interview, that there are problems with declarative statements. And what you
Yeah.
were saying was essentially what you can do has to be very subtle, by which
That's
I
right.
think you mean indirect and suggestive rather than the typical masculine thing is just to go like, well, of course you just do this, right? You just tell them, here's the problem, here's the solution, right? The guy, what brings out his toolbox, when and often doesn't, there's no subtlety whatsoever, and there's also no sensitivity to the other person's sort of where they are in the process, what
Right.
might be appropriate at this moment or in the phase of the process that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, please, anything that comes to mind about this.
Well, once again, I mean, there's two things. Obviously, there's the therapeutic approaches. There's the actual use of these things for therapy within a therapeutic setting, which is one thing. And then there's the things that we encounter and the things we experience in daily, everyday life in terms of how what we see around us, the types of interactions you see amongst people you know, friends that you may have, and so on and so on. Um, and just generally, I mean, like you say, you've studied language patterns and so on and so forth. It's amazing how I think NLP, just to talk about that for a moment, that really highlighted the old saying, the map is not the territory. It's kind of what I'm talking about, that disconnect that some individuals have between what's going on in their own minds and how they choose to communicate those ideas, and such things, simple things as the art of conversation and so on. You know, it seems I don't I don't know if I'm right or wrong by saying this, but I've noticed a marked increase. I'd be interested in your opinion on this. A marked increase in a kind of almost a fragmentation of the ability to communicate in a meaningful manner, in a way whereby individuals can actually have meaningful conversations, where people have the ability to listen and have the ability to speak and be heard. These this crossflow, this dance, which seemed to be so much part of everyday life, seems to be becoming rarer and rarer, I would say, in the last 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
don't know
there's
if
a
anyone else is
breakdown.
experiencing this.
Yeah, there's some kind of a, my friend was using the phrase positive disintegration,
Right.
but I'm not
Yes.
sure it's positive. There's certainly a disintegration going on.
Sure.
And I would, we can talk about this. I'm careful. I want to be careful to preserve the threads, but
Yes.
I. So one of the things I pay attention to is a neologism that occurred to me at the beginning of my experience of whatever it was the experience was, where I imagined the network of human minds as a place, as
Right.
a physical environment. And I call that the human cognitium. There are cognitia all around us that feed into ours. Um, but the human cognitium is undergoing a series of what look like catastrophic fragmentations to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's being reflected in um, dissonance in human
Yeah.
communication, and particularly in our perceptions related. I mean, this is kind of a running joke at the moment, but in our perceptions related to identity, like
Right.
who
Yeah.
someone is, what something is, why, its function. Um, and I was talking with a friend last night, and we often have very playful, revelatory conversations. And I suggested to him that without us knowing it, over the past few years, the world is no longer the world. Like it's a completely different thing now. It looks the same on the outside.
Mm.
It seems to be, we all think it's the same thing, but it's not that thing anymore. It's a different thing. And
Yeah.
so we were sort of playfully, um, I was suggesting that we could experiment by sending signals to the world, like pinging it, like in a submarine, right? When you ping another submarine, you could ping the world and see what it brings back so that you could get a sense of whatever it has become or what it is
Yeah.
becoming.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's to some extent what we're kind of doing now is
Yes, yes.
I think that part of the thing that's certainly driving me on to speak about these things and maybe driving you on to speak about these things is because it feels like an important time to speak of these things in a way where one hopes others are going to be giving us some feedback with regards to what's going on.
Yes, drawn into the conversation and
Yeah,
fascinated and curious and
yeah,
have a sense of wonder and exploration with us.
absolutely,
Yes, yes.
absolutely.
As if maybe we are what I can't quite find the word. It's strange because in a way you can I imagine something actually this I don't know why, but it makes me feel tearful. I
Yeah.
imagine two magicians,
Uh-huh.
not that I'm claiming to be one or that you claim to be one, but I imagine two magicians playfully getting together on stage and embodying the curiosity and passion and life paths of the audience without the magicians themselves knowing it, right? And then engaging in this play on the stage that enlightens the magicians as the avatars of the audience, something like this, right? And
Yeah,
what a beautiful, like ecstatic
yeah,
figure.
yeah, absolutely. And I feel that we're at a very, very interesting time. Most definitely, certainly a very, very interesting time.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm not sure if I remember if I actually said this to you last time or whether I said it to you in private on another occasion, but I really feel like we're at a really, really important point in terms of this communication we're speaking about,
Yes.
communicating ideas. There's something really quite important about this type of work, sharing these things that we're doing right now. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I'm sure you wouldn't be here either doing what you're doing if you didn't feel this same almost a duty to be
Yes.
speaking about these
Yes.
things.
Urgency.
There's an
Like
urgency. Yeah.
literally, it's an emerge and see,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's an emerge and see,
Right.
an emergency, right?
Yes. Yes.
Uh, and
Yes.
yes, it does seem very urgent and very. There are many people who they are dying inside. They're
Yeah.
completely lost, and I'm not entirely free of that myself, right?
I think all of us are to some extent, experiencing the hardships of the age that we're living within.
Mm,
That's
yeah,
for sure.
yes.
I think many would be would possibly be foolish to say they're not. But at the same time, I think it's a really incredibly hopeful time and a time where some incredible new points of, there's a type of regeneration that seems to be taking place at the moment. Um, and I feel a new opening for these types of explorations in a way that I've never quite seen to this extent before. No, I really do. I really feel like we're on, uh, without claiming to be in any sense, grandiose or an expert on these subjects. I'd just say very happy to be part of opening the conversation. Really.
Yes, I agree. And I don't, I mean, one of the things that I'm learning more about, though it's been clear to me as an artist for a long time, is that personal identity is kind of a trap, right? So the yes, I understand. Obviously, I have some concern about Darren and his life and his whatever, right? His
Yeah.
opportunities and so forth. But it's much more fascinating the layers above Darren and beneath Darren
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
travel there together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, something very strange is going on. I made a recording recently where I said, um, I think the recording is just called 2024 is not a year. Um, this like there's no more of whatever the hell was going on before has been thrown up into this suspended sort of cloud storm state, and nobody understands what the hell is going on anymore. Or if they do, it's just because they're clinging to the teddy bear of their previous suppositions about the world, like desperately. But yeah, it really is something profound because on the one hand, there's all these new opportunities. And on the other hand, there's this catastrophic and agonic, dissolution and pain and death. Um, so yeah, I don't want to use the trope from Shakespeare, so I'll just suggest that trope without saying it. But okay, so there's so much more. I'm by the way, how are we doing on time? I'm fine, but I want to check.
I'm okay. I'm okay for time at the moment as well. Yeah,
Excellent.
I think we're
Yeah, I'm
doing
I'm
okay.
excited to
Yeah,
continue.
yeah, yeah. We can
Um,
continue.
so okay, so what happened that night? The frost, you look up,
Saw the thing, the whole thing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
As I explained.
And
So,
what were you
so
feeling at that moment?
what was I feeling? As I say, just this incredible energetic connectivity, and I felt like I was touching eternity, quite literally, like touching eternity. And that experience, strangely, I had I kind of discovered how to switch it back on at will.
Oh, beautiful.
But this came much later. But
Mhm.
whenever I did switch it on at will, it reminded me immediately of that moment once again, so like immediate recognition of that experience. So that what I'm referring to is, and this touches on the courses that I do and things like this back here in England. I do them elsewhere occasionally if people ask me as well. But one of the very
Talk for a
important
little bit
parts.
about those.
Yeah, yeah. So like I do every year I try to do one, maybe two courses in, usually they're advertised as mesmerism, fascination, presence. And I mean, this is how you and I connected. Yeah, good. I think I said on part one of this that it was about 9 years ago or so that we actually first connected, but I think it was more than that. It was actually, I think it was more like 12 actually.
It is.
I started doing those courses about 12 years ago now. um Mesmerism, fascination, and presence. So obviously the thing I do sort of every year is hold these courses. Mesmerism is a, for those who don't know, is a type of hypnosis. It's an earlier type of hypnosis, more of a non-verbal form of hypnosis. Um, and it was popularized by Franz Anton Mesmer, hence the term mesmerism. So
Approximately what year?
pardon?
When was he active?
Yeah, so this was sort of in the 1700s, so mid 1700s. and it was just prior to the French Revolution, actually. He was around just prior to the French Revolution doing a lot of his work. He was connected with some quite interesting people. I don't know if you know this, but he had his a thing called the glass harmonica, which was an actual instrument.
Yes, I know about this instrument. Please
And
continue.
the classical piece of music, Moonlight Sonata, was written for this
Hmm.
instrument.
Yeah, so
Uh,
what this is it's a series of rings, glass.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a plate with a ring around the edge of the
yeah,
plate,
yeah.
tube sort of, and these are put on a spindle, and
That's right.
it's a cone,
Yes,
and perhaps there are either pedals or keys
pedals. Yeah,
that you
pedals,
would
and then
spin.
a little tray of water to dip your fingertips in that you can actually rub onto
Oh,
the
wow. Okay. Yeah. So the spindle spins and you get the sound that's like what you get when you circle a crystal bell or a glass.
precisely, precisely.
And it's a
Yes,
profoundly non-ordinary sound. I mean,
absolutely,
it's like a
absolutely.
harmonic. It's almost like being able to play an instrument that only produces harmonics, which
That's right.
themselves are kind of a magical thing.
Absolutely. And so like I say, Moonlight Sonata was composed with this instrument in mind.
Hmm.
Then Benjamin Franklin actually gifted this instrument. He had one made and gifted it to Mesmer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's one
Uh,
on display in London actually. There's a Franklin Museum, I think, in London, and there's an example of it there.
I've never seen one. Have you seen one?
Yeah, yeah. Like I say, there's actually been one. There's one on display there in London.
Hmm.
Or there was some years ago. It's been a long, long time since I've seen it, but there was actually a model of it.
I don't want to branch, but I'm curious, have you ever been in a place where one is being played?
I haven't heard one being played, I have to say. No, no.
But you have heard recordings of them.
Oh yes, for sure,
Yeah,
for
yeah, me
sure.
too.
Yes,
I remember
absolutely.
encountering this and just being blown away and thinking like, I must find a way to have one of these when I first heard it. Yeah.
Well, the
Oh,
thing
please.
is the actual tones themselves. Mesmer believed that the tones themselves catapulted the individuals who heard them because of the tones, actually activated certain states or trance states in themselves.
Yeah.
You know, the tones themselves activated some of these states. So that's interesting.
Yes, I have a sort of peculiar personal sensitivity to anything that produces a non-ordinary effect or like in terms of Stephen King's book, like The Shining,
Yeah,
there's certain features or facets of reality. It's not like a visual shine. There's like a spiritual shine to them. They
right.
resonate, they ring, right? You can tell like, oh, here's one of the hidden keys. Yeah.
Yeah,
And two very obvious features of this for me that were apparent in childhood were spiders and they're making of webs, right? Just watch them make what is going on there. You could study just that one thing and it would lead you everywhere you needed to go, right? It's
yeah,
like a master key to every library hidden in an organism.
yes,
And then
yes.
similarly, another place where a similar key is hidden, a living key, is in the praying mantises.
Ah,
It's
yes. I've
that
noticed
calm.
you're particularly keen on mantises.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. But let's not branch too far. So, what were the precursors that led Mesmer to his discoveries, do you think?
Right. Okay. So when Mesmer was, I think when Mesmer's career was just beginning, when he was first introduced to the concept of magnetism from a priest. I forget the name of the priest.
Fair enough.
Um, but he introduced him the concept of magnetism, and he utilized actual magnets.
Wow.
on different points of the body.
Uh-huh. But of
I know
course,
that some esoteric priests have actually done this and used this therapy in different ways.
you and I both know that the power isn't necessarily in the magnets, is it?
No,
Great.
no.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, so Mesmer himself, quickly junked the use of the magnets
Mhm.
and sort of really concentrated more on the natural ability that we all have as individuals. So he called it animal magnetism because of the fact that the animal kingdom exhibits this force in abundance. But we humans kind of don't seem to believe we have it, but clearly we do.
Mhm.
And certain individuals seem to have had it in historical epochs, perhaps more than others. And there are famous examples of this. Um, and so, some people they thought of it as charisma or something like this, which itself, the word charisma relates to the golden anointing. So, so this force is something all individuals have at different
I
levels. So
would
it's a
argue,
natural ability, natural
I
ability.
would suggest that if you wanted to see a clear example of it that's commonly accessible, the gaze of infants,
Oh yes. Oh
right?
yes, yes, yes,
They use
absolutely.
this. I think they're actually surprised. I think the infants can be surprised when it fails, right?
Right.
Because they seem to know that it works. But yes, match gaze with an infant or a very young child, and you
Uh-huh.
will see directly an example of the kind of thing I think you're talking about. And I would
Absolutely.
also suggest that praying mantises are doing something very similar, right? There's a reason why a creature this big can terrify a grizzly bear,
Right.
right? And
Right.
send it screaming for the woods, you know?
Right. Right.
It's not an accident and it's not just a visual display, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Please continue, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, where was I going with this?
Well, you said that certain people were clearly more
Yeah,
skillful than others. Animal
yeah.
magnetism, the humans don't necessarily believe they have it, but we do. And some people either have sort of a greater capacity and or develop it.
Right, yeah. So it's something that is there in abundance in the animal kingdom. I was talking about the example of snakes on the previous part we were doing,
Mhm.
and basically it's not just not just the vision, not just the gaze that they exert, but it's also everything else. It's the actual awareness of the physicality of their existence in this present moment. So this is where we link back to the Milky Way experience, because the key component is the physical presence. The key component that empowers all of those other techniques is the physical moment by moment awareness of your existence, or of each one of our existence. So by contacting that, we generate, through the conscious awareness of our physical existence, we generate a kind of a field,
Mhm.
and we switch it on. So that experience that I had with the heavens and the earth and me sandwiched or hit between them was very much a moment where the crunching of the feet, the stars above my head, me between, the biting of the chill of the air on what had been a really hot day. Yeah.
It's like a rod ringing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's the origin world and the physical earth
Yes.
meeting and sort of mating and
Yes.
resonating. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was talking about the alchemical components of this. And of course, the actual earth that I was walking upon at that particular point in the path was pure peat. jet black peat. So the moorlands have the blackest peat I've ever seen in my life. And like I say, even at certain other points, like the Pennine Ridge, you'd be walking on the peat on that particular part of the walk. You'd be walking upon the peat, and the black soil of the peat, which the Egyptians used to call Khem, by the way. So Khem, Khem. So the
Which
black soil,
Kemet comes from.
which Kemet comes from. So it was the actual residue cast up from the Nile over and over again would bring all of this fertile peat onto the surface, or the
Mm.
silt. So that would be the thing that would give the fertility and bring the fertility to the land. And of course, the Lyke Wake Walk.
Almost like a menstrual exudate of the river.
Yes, 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 yes.
Right?
Exactly this. Exactly
Yes.
this. Exactly this. So you have the Nile Delta with
Yes.
this, you say, with this exudate coming out and fertilizing all of the land around it.
Oh my
Now,
God.
we're starting to get all Egyptian again here, but
Yeah.
we're talking about this fragmentation. And of course, the fragmentation and the whole art of healing is to bring back together that which is scattered.
Mm.
So the body of Osiris, of course, represents, like all the shamanic myths, the body is scattered to the four winds, so to speak. And Isis was the one that got the separation from the land, turned herself into the hawk, looked down upon the land and discovered the fragments scattered across the land and brought them back together again to actually make the first mummy, which was the resurrection of Osiris from the world of the dead.
It strikes me that the Eye of Thoth is actually related to the Eye of the Kestrel,
Right.
little hawk, the desert
Yes.
hawk, right?
Yes.
Which you can't really see it, but uh, this image is an image, a very complex magical image of Kestrel.
Inside the frame behind you.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, it also implies rising above the human or even the temporal, right, into the what Amon Hillman calls the aeonic life,
Right. Right.
which is
Right.
the life outside of time. Because it's not just outside of location in space, it's outside of location in time. And from there, you can find all the pieces,
Yeah.
so to speak. And again, now here again, we have this concept of the bridge being, right?
Absolutely.
Right? The bridge being who becomes sort of a linchpin above all of these fragments, linking them together, and then perhaps drawing them back down into a being, a situation, a place, the healing. Please continue.
Well, exactly. One of my big questions today was basically, okay, so what is healing anyway, in its truest sense? We can have some fairly simple examples, like, oh, you want to heal bad eyesight, you want to heal, I don't know, a throat condition or something like that. We've got these small examples of healing, but of course, the healing we're speaking of, really, when we're speaking of sacred healing, is we're talking about, like, it's an overused term, but making something, bringing the holism, bringing something back to a sense of holiness.
There is also a feature of anamnesis,
You're right. Yes.
forgetting, which,
Yes.
not everyone knows this, but the word lethal, it comes from the river Lethe, which
Right.
we dipped
Yes.
in between our lives. And there's a bunch of sort of narratological arcs around why we here on Earth forget our previous incarnations or perhaps embodiments. So yes, there's an unforgetting aspect because it's weird, it's almost as if in some of us, in some features of our lives, we specifically bury some part of us
Hmm.
that is fragmented by a situation, and then we enact a drama, personally, a personal drama. I have done this, right? It's embarrassing, but I know I'm aware of it.
We humans are sometimes embarrassing.
It's true. So I will enact a drama about the part of myself that I dissociated from and hid from. And the
Yeah.
drama is very mythic, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
often. In transactional analysis, there's a concept of life scripts,
Yeah.
right? Which are coping mechanisms often established in childhood that are useful, sort of fairy tale-ish, right? But when
Hmm.
they are not conscious in our adult lives, when they're no longer really necessary and we have the capacity to negotiate and work with what's actually going on, it's helpful for us to make conscious this life script, this mythic story that we've been playing out,
Hmm.
and perhaps rewrite it. Right?
Yeah, and the thing is, of course, you know, if we go into the much bigger, wider picture, you know, I mean, I've said, and this leads on to a lot of the things I was going to say about the hill that I was talking about. It all points to and leads to many details which confirmed for me in various ways the threads, the connective threads to actually weave me back to my previous incarnations, so to speak.
Oh, wow.
And this is where this becomes really important. And this is where I gain this peace and faith, for want of a better word, um, of this process that whenever I receive any of these pieces, whenever I receive any of these fragments, I don't worry about chasing them because I know, I absolutely know that all I have to do is wait.
Hmm.
Because there's going to be a time where, like I said, with the individual that I met over a coffee table who told me the name, I knew with certainty. I wasn't even looking for it. I knew with certainty that this was the name. And I knew at that moment that all I have to do is call on that name. And I didn't chase it. And all these little fragments that I've parked on the shelf and just bookmarked them, put them on the shelf and waited. What it is it's all the fragments that I know that as long as I keep myself open to all of these possibilities, that everything that belongs to my trajectory, my journey through time and eternity is all going to come to me. I don't think the purpose of our current incarnation is necessarily to chase after all of these missing fragments, but they play a really important part and they will come to us anyway. So sometimes I might wake up and be woken up by a repeat. I will be repeating to myself a specific set of words or a specific word. And sometimes it's in a language I don't even know what it is.
Mhm.
The important thing is that I remember it, I write it down, and it sticks with me. The
Mhm.
other important thing about these things is because they're explained later. And sometimes each one of these phrases and words are like a key that opens up a whole insight into another area. But sometimes it takes 5, 7 years before I get the next part. So I'm just sharing with you how for me these things work. These little fragments, which seem to belong to I'm sort of lost for words, but like a kind of fragments of like a weaving tapestry that belongs to many other incarnations that have existed from times before.
So there's a figure that perhaps might be useful or helpful here. I
Yeah.
call it the starry blanket. And one can imagine that over time, many lives, they are sewing, in the sense of like needlework. They're sewing a sort of a celestial blanket with acts of beauty and intelligence and courage and rescue and healing, and that our souls are actually drawn from stars in this blanket, many of them, right? So that our
Yes.
soul isn't one thing, it's like a set of connections between historical beings and places and moments and such. And then as we live, we are adding to this blanket, right? And it might seem fragmentary from down here, where there's this star and the moon and that planet and so forth. But from up there, it's not fragmentary, right?
No,
It
no,
seems
indeed.
fragmentary because of our relationship with linear time, I think, primarily.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely right. Yeah, because of our relationship with linear time.
And
But
this is the thing that you doubt. This is the thing
yes,
that
yes,
you
yes.
learn to doubt, right? And that's
Yeah,
why you're not concerned with urgencies when you find the fragment, you place it on the shelf, you know linear time is an illusion,
that's
right?
it.
So you will traverse the
That's it.
illusion of linear time, and the integration will naturally
That's it.
emerge to
That's
your
it.
way.
I couldn't have put it better myself, sir. But you've put into words what I kind of viscerally feel,
Mhm.
because it is a feeling, it's a feeling that there is no need to there is no need to be too concerned about it. Although, like we said earlier, there is a feeling of a sense of urgency right now in some of the things we're discussing and communicating and sharing. I understand your point of view on that. But for me personally, in relation to these experiences, it comes across to me personally in very much a way where it's like, right, okay, I'm just getting another little bit of confirmation of my, for want of a better word, my connection with eternity.
Yeah, I mean, connection is not essentially, it's more your identity as in eternity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you and eternity are the same thing, even though there's the Milky Way and there's Lee,
It's
right?
true for all of us.
Yes, yes, it is. But and it's so profound because when, like in our conversation now, you have two disparate sort of wanderers, right? And they both had these long paths, but when they come together, there's this profound uh, conversation, um, which is a kind of a musical composition,
Mm.
the language, the spoken language of which is in a sense the least important thing, even though it's the glass harmonica of our
Yeah.
souls sort of resonating back and forth.
Yes, yes.
I want to return to something you were speaking about earlier, unless there's something urgently that you need to share right now.
No, no, please go ahead.
Okay, so what is the gaze?
What is
We've
the case?
Yeah, we've been taught, and I'm sure you'll have some things to add here, but I want to introduce this topic. We've been taught that what we see is passive, right? That our eyes are receptors for light, that all that's happening in vision is that we receive the reflected light of things around us, and the brain organizes that into a sort of a picture in consciousness, right? It flips it over on the back of the retina. We know we have the scientific explanation of the mechanics of human vision. Um, but for most of human history, none of that was what was being understood. The Greeks were
No.
absolutely aware, and I can't explain the complexities of their awareness and understanding of this fact, but that the eyes project, it's participatory, just as when you speak, my ear rings and I hear, something very similar is happening with vision. It is kind of a speaking of energies into the world, which then caress and touch in their various intentional ways the flower or the cloud or the bog, and then this returns the sort of resonance of how we reached out to touch and the purposes for which we reached out to touch affect the world, and this effect returns to us as vision. Now,
Yes,
let me say
yes.
one more thing before I hand this over to you, because I'm desperately curious about what you think about these things. I've had the experience of waking up in my bed, looking around my room, seeing how things are laid out, my girlfriend next to me on the bed, the shape of her hair on the pillow, and so forth, and then realizing that my eyes are closed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then opening my eyes and having nothing effectively change except a feature of the feeling of the origin of the seeing.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so it's very clear to me that it is possible to see without eyes.
Yes.
Now I'll hand this over to you and whatever. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yes, yes. Well, if we refer back to part one of the conversation we had last time, we were talking about the sun, and we were talking about where is the sun? We can point to it in the sky and all of this sort of stuff, and yeah, there's the sun and the rest of it. But like
Right.
we were talking about seeing the sun in dreams, feeling the sun upon your skin in dreams, and so on. And where is the sun in a dream? It's like, where is it? Where is the sun you actually see? Where is it? Where is it? The whole notion of the heliocentric theory and the geocentric theory. Is the Earth in the center? Does one go around the other, or is it the other going around the other? Well, yes, both are true. And so we're back to that old quandary again. And what you've just been describing is, I'll bring your attention to a very strong symbol that many may be aware of or may have seen. And that's the image of some of the images of Akhenaten. So you have that famous image of Akhenaten, sometimes with the Aten itself, the sun, his version of Ra, or the solar god, the Aten, with its various rays with hands on the end. Each ray has got a hand on
Oh,
the end.
yes, yes, yes. The sun and then the rays,
The
and then
rays
each
with
ray
hands,
has like a hand.
hand on the end. Yeah,
It's sort of like this or something, right? If I remember correctly.
yeah, that's right. So it's a splayed. It's a sun with a splay of different rays, and each ray has got a hand on the end of each ray. And sometimes you see, I've seen images of Akhenaten and Nefertiti with rays literally coming out of their eyes, like similar, like rays jutting out of their eyes. So this touches on a lot of the things you're speaking about in regards to, there is the manifest. And does the manifestation come from within out? Is it that light which reaches out into space only forms images when it has something, when it has something to bounce off, in the same way as the sun sends out rays to, say, for example, the moon, and the moon gives the reflection of the light. Everything we see from the old perspective, you were mentioning the Greeks, but also the Egyptians, there was this notion that everything that everything that was projected from within out, so to speak. You have an image here, yes, that's it, of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, And yeah, so you have the arten with all of the rays coming out. And you can't see it too well, but on the ends of those rays, you have each one of the rays has got a hand on the end.
Yeah,
So
and she's got a child in her lap.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Very
Uh,
peculiar.
Yes,
Peculiar.
very profound. Um,
Absolutely.
these things. Okay, so I didn't mean to interrupt.
So
Uh,
so with the gaze itself, all of these things you're talking about come into play. The gaze is not a if the one who is practicing can truly step inside this way that you've just described, this particular perspective, for want of a better word, if the practitioner can step inside that and then experience that, then there is the opportunity for that to take place.
oh, there's so much here.
The,
The
the, the
practice,
recipient would be the passive one.
yes, but it's also resembles the relation where okay, this is just something that's occurring to me. If the practitioner becomes the point of origin, not the sun as hypostasis, but the origin of why there is a sun,
Right.
right? And then the patient, so to speak, becomes sort of like the earth or something illumined.
Or the moon.
Yes, exactly, precisely. Illumined by that. And so this ancient originary role, uh, not a play, but a role embodiment, yeah,
Right.
occurs sort of naturally and in a way magnetically
Yes. Yes.
because of the ancientness of these roles, right?
Yes.
Please continue.
Well, yes. I mean, what you were saying about, one being literally like a sun, the other being like a moon. You literally create that polarity between the practitioner and the subject. There has to be that polarity created, and it has to be something which is done in a very, I keep using the word, in a very visceral manner.
Mm-hmm.
So when an animal is exuding this force, like a snake, for example, or a lion, or something like this, or some other beast, it's actually doing it usually with the intention of it being almost like it's going to catch its prey, so to speak. It has to find a way to, in a sense, I'm trying. I'm not very good at finding words today, but in a sense, it literally plummets the recipient into a complete trance just for a moment, often,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that state that the recipient falls into that the hunter, so to speak, uses to its advantage.
Okay, I want to say a few things here briefly. So, in nature, those of us who are sensitive to sentience, consciousness, awareness, intelligence, particularly,
Yeah,
will see different forms of intelligences embodied in nature. For example,
right.
in the eyes of a cow, it's not the same as looking in the eyes of a raccoon, or it's not the same as looking in the eye of a praying mantis. It's not the same as looking in the eye of a cat. A
Mm.
snake's eye is a very particular thing, but one of the best examples of what you're talking about is utilized because it's really obviously a human can easily see it on film, is what a cuttlefish does when it is hypnotizing a shrimp. And
Ah,
you'll see pulses of colorful light traversing the skin of the cuttlefish in an increasing frequency, and you'll see the shrimp actually start to just sort of float off and then and then
yep,
wham, it grabs
yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
And for the praying mantis, what it does is this kind of thing. It will weave slowly
That's
and
it.
then very rapidly and then strike.
That's it. Just like a snake. In
It's very
so
similar. there are forms of martial art that are not dissimilar, except
That's
that
right.
in martial art, the goal is to hide the buildup, right? You don't want the
Yeah.
buildup to be seen. So the buildup becomes internal,
Right.
visceral,
Right.
like you say, visceral. Please continue.
Yeah, this is right. And when the individual is practicing with fascination techniques, the gaze techniques, um, it's very subtle. So this is something, obviously, if I was working with someone directly and teaching them exactly how to do this, there is a certain way to do it. And so often you have to demonstrate it on the person you're trying to teach, of course. You know, you have to demonstrate it directly to them so that they actually grasp what it is you're actually doing. Once they've been on the sort of recipient end of it, then it's my job to actually get that individual to replicate that effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I would then coach that individual into how to actually replicate that properly, and teach them all the little tips on what to look for, precisely what to look for, to know that it's being done properly. And that's the important thing, is teaching them exactly what to look for, because there are certain signs um, that it's being done properly.
Yes.
They're unmistakable, you might say.
Uh-huh. It's different from hypnosis, but there are signs also in the client in hypnosis that you
Yes, yeah,
can
this is
see.
very true. This is
You
very true. But
can Often you can see the pulse in someone's neck. You can see it slow. You can see the
yeah,
relaxation of the facial muscles. You can detect the shoulders may drop slightly. The breathing
yes,
changes. These are hard to see over a camera, but when you're in person with someone, they're relatively easy to see. I'm sure there are different signs for the success of mesmerism, but there's another principle I want to speak briefly about here. And before I continue, I just want to say, I think that sometimes when people are listening to me speaking, they may have the impression that I'm reading from the book of what I already know,
ah,
right? Because this is what it is common for us to think when people speak. That they are saying things they already know, they have known before. And in our conversation, much of what is taking place is not that. It is something very strange is happening where my awareness, it feels like, is touching a nonverbal mirror in you.
right.
And then I am able to somehow coalesce. It's like the thing we were talking about with seeing. I can
Yes,
coalesce
yes,
the reflection, and then I can begin to articulate what I am feeling or seeing, which is
yeah,
not something I have known before, or
right,
articulated before, or
right.
seen before. So this is what is so beautiful and exciting. Part of what is so beautiful or exciting for me, as well as the anamnoetic reweaving of histories and potentials and seeing. The thing I wanted to mention is that again, my friend Ryan Firstdiver, who certainly doesn't consider himself a magician, but the path of a Blackfoot ceremonial person is involved with something. They don't have the concept for magic. There's lots of words in English. They don't even have a concept for it. And their treatment of identity is so different from ours that the idea of concrete identity basically doesn't exist. So you see a person, it's not necessarily that person, right? They don't just presume, oh, it's that person. Because you could be coming from the sun, or you could be coming from the land, or you could be coming from another tribe. So your identity is in how you relate rather than in your visage and your name badge or whatever, as it is in the West, right? We just see
Right.
Joe, we think, oh, that's Joe, I know.
hmm
I was taught to not think that way during my experience. I was taught to very carefully participatorially establish our identities together rather than presume them. But there's two principles that I think are relevant, perhaps to hypnosis and maybe mesmerism. And one is similitude, the resemblance,
Science. Mhm.
right? Resembling. When you say, like, I get them to emulate me, right? That's the similitude principle, right?
Well, it can never be truly emulated because it's such an infinitely variable and minuscule actual thing that takes place. But yes, you're on the right track, and there is definitely a similitude, and and
Well, emulation, it's
there is
not
something you can
emulation.
replicate.
Yeah, it's not emulation that leads to success. It's emulation that maybe communicates the form, and then the form has to be embodied. It's the
Yes, yes,
embodiment, I
yes.
think, that is successful or not. But then the other principle, which I think is quite trippy, is contagion.
Well, I was going to actually use the word transmission actually.
Fair enough.
Because there's the principle of transmission is something that's very real when you're working with the type of thing that I'm talking about, because it's something which is coursing through you,
Hmm.
and it's almost connecting to a field of information that exists out there beyond us. So if it's coming through me and I know how to actually, and I successfully or, enable this to be transmitted to the individual that I'm working with, then it's by the very nature of this energetic field starting to connect, one will connect to that continuum which links through all of my own experiences somehow, and it actually is transmitted to the individual who I'm working with.
Yes. So when you say this continuum, so to speak,
Yep.
it's almost as if not just your history, but the lineages that feed into
Yes.
your history
Yes.
go into the other person and as a seed sort of and begin to light up and expand. And I'm not trying to couch our discussion in terms of concepts from, for example, traditional Blackfoot ceremony, but crucially in their way of life, they have this uh, concept that is more primordial than the other two that I was just using, which are similitude and contagion. And obviously, those are English words. It's transfer. One
Right.
to be, in English, we might call it initiation, but it's much more intimate than this. It's literally both something being placed into you and also you being drawn into a lineage history that you now become a family member of, so to speak. Does
Yeah. So we can bring this analogy to, say, for example, when somebody is in certain types of tradition where you have, say, for example, the laying on of hands as an actual transmission, it's similar to this. There is something that is transmitted through time from lots of different individuals who have existed physically, but maybe don't exist physically anymore. However, they're present in you at the moment that you transmit to the next person.
yes,
And you, in the future, when you're no longer incarnate in the normal sense, will be transmitted through your, the connection you had. You have added to that
yes,
continuum of energy, amplified it in some measure, and then that's all added to what's passed down to the future generations.
yes.
There is a type of transmission that we're speaking of here, and initiation, as you say. It's all there. These are all relevant terms, maybe not always satisfactory words, but they
Yes,
describe the
concepts.
same idea.
I think
Yeah.
the concepts are easily understood. I just want to share a couple of other things briefly.
Yeah.
When I began to study Tai Chi, I had studied it before with a teacher, and then I lost my form, and there's a whole adventure behind that. But I found these five older men who were practicing every morning, and they began to teach me.
Yeah.
And I was very passionate about this, right? And pretty soon, within about 3 months in, I started having dreams. I had three or four of them, in which a group of older Asian men would come and they would just straight up tell me, we've heard about you and we're here to check you out.
Yeah.
Want to
Yeah.
see, like, who are you? What are you for real? Are you the kind of person we would want to join the family, and this kind of thing. And thankfully, in those cases, it worked out well um,
Mm.
for me. But there was a similar thing that happened when I experienced a transfer from Blackfoot culture, and it was much more profound and like primordial. And
Right.
there were like hundreds of men, warriors, ceremonial elders and stuff that came. There was this quest. There were all these
Mhm.
amazing features um, that were nothing like a regular dream, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Very obviously,
Mm.
something's going on here. So I just wanted to share that because it might help people to understand what is meant by joining a lineage or being introduced or having a transmission, right? It really is to become a part of a lineage and a family, and to be checked out, right? To be sort
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
tested. Like, are you for real? You want to sell this? What do
Mm.
you want? Actually, often there's a question when you meet uh, a non-ordinary being or intelligence, they
Yeah.
may praise you, right? They may sort of build you up and say like, oh yeah, you're really cool. We like you, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to give you a gift. What do you want? Right? And it's very, because they're really trying to figure out, are you selfish?
Yeah. Right.
Right? Are you selfish is really kind of the question. And by the
Yeah.
way, that question leads to a ladder of other questions. It's
Yes. Of course.
half the first question, right? I think. But yes, please continue. And how are we doing? How are we doing on time? How are you?
I think I can do maybe about another 10 minutes or something
Okay.
like that, more or
Okay.
less, on this occasion. So I'm just trying to work out where we were because so really, to me, I'm trying to find a way to sort of conclude it on this occasion. So
Yeah, I mean, we could hopefully we'll have further exploration.
yeah, well, like I say, when I've got the ability to make it coincide with everything I've got going on here, I'm very happy to do that.
As am I. Yes.
Yeah, great. So to sort of try and pull this together at the moment, it's more a thing of like, where is all of this going? What is all of this giving to us? It seems as if there is a question hanging.
Hmm.
We experience these things. I'm sure there are many others similar to ourselves who've been having these experiences, and it's been feeding into the work that we're doing and reflecting itself back in the work that we're doing.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly, we can very likely even identify what we believe our roles and our duty is in this incarnation with regards to how we pass this on to people and what utility it has as well,
Hmm.
for the benefit of others. But there is a big question which is hanging there all the time, and that is, where is this all ultimately leading to? This is the question for me,
Hmm.
or at least the question which I'm going to leave hanging in the air, perhaps.
Mhm.
Now, of course, it would probably be foolish for us to to conclusively answer anything of the kind.
Agreed.
And I think we've touched on that previously. Sometimes there's no point in, it's not right to kill that question.
Yes.
Um, but it's certainly something which is worth putting out there, even if it's for our own personal work.
In our conversations so far, we have rung, we have sounded bells
Yeah,
along a trajectory, right? And those ringing notes, they naturally coalesce over time,
yes.
right? In the same way that you were speaking about the recovered fragments and how it's not, you allow them to be sort of preserved without constant attention and inquiry. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And also the concept of suggestion and indirect communication is very profound. So for me, our conversation sounds these notes that ring in the between of our conversations, and I'm sure will ring in the audience in a
Yeah,
very
that's my hope.
generative, yes, in a
That's my
very, very generative and fertilizing way, like that,
Absolutely.
like the
Yeah.
peat,
Yeah.
like the menstruational, intensity of the blue sky and the sonic purple,
Yep.
right? The red purple. Yeah, I have so much faith in you and your way and your path. You as a being who has a noble purpose. You have great charisma, but you're not like a personality, in the way of someone who's self-aggrandizing, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to learn and see with you every time we may have it.
Yeah, and Darren, similarly with yourself, you the way you lay things out in terms of how your own summaries and descriptions are incredibly illuminating on the spot. For me, it's not even like I'm sure maybe if I listen to this interview in the future, I'll have further revelations. But in the midst of actually being here talking about these things, there's been a great deal of actual living, things kickstarting, like coming to life in my own understanding right there on the spot, as we saw earlier today. And that in itself, is it's incredibly inspiring. And there's something about the way that you're presenting these things to me, or reflecting them back to me in some instances, which is incredibly illuminating for me. So it's there's something very fruitful about the way I feel we're interacting on these matters.
It's profoundly the same for me. It's almost as if the light of my history and awareness and the light of your history and awareness, they meet somewhere, and then
Yeah.
there's like a group of figures who speak back to us from the intersection, right? It's so beautiful, and I'm just so grateful and humbled. I
Yeah,
can't
me
wait.
too. Me too. And I'm also curiously aware of the fact that there is something I feel there is something in your own experiences and background and in mine that somehow relates to something beyond us which we've not quite yet been able to quite fathom or grasp, but it feels like there's a reason why this connection came together, so to
Oh,
speak.
absolutely. It's so healing for me.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
inspiring.
Yeah.
And it's so insightful. I've learned so much. I mean, it sounds like I'm talking and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. I get it, but I've learned so much every time we come together. And it really is humbling because it's not like, it's not like it's about what Darren knows or anything like that. It's something very magical, sort of mysterious and alive. And I just want to honor that and you and your work. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful, and I can't wait for the next time. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully when you're over here in the UK, I mean, I don't think we can miss the chance to try to, to pull that together,
Oh yeah,
to meet up and do something, go to some of these sacred sites, have a look
absolutely.
around.
And
Uh,
I just want to extend the invitation. You ever want to come here? You've got a
yeah,
spot. And,
yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever been to California?
I've never been, well, actually, I think when I was 10 years old, I did, but that
Mm.
was when I was 10 years old, it was actually Florida, not California. No, so yeah, it's
Mm.
Florida,
Yeah,
but
because well, we'll talk about this offline, but I
yeah,
do plan to
sure.
come there, and yeah, I'm just so excited, and thank you so much, Lee. It's
Yeah,
brilliant to have a chance to speak with you and learn together. So
absolutely.
until
Absolutely.
our next adventure,
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
may your path be blessed and beautiful.
Yours too, sir. All right. I
Okay.
know.
Bye bye for now.
Bye-bye.